tea. Neither of us come from conventional backgrounds in many respects, and both of us have always felt not quite belonging. Neither of our families were going to press us to be career-driven and family-orientated and worrying about when children are coming and when mortgages are happening and when marriage is happening and all that debris. The thing about being on a boat is the way we live. If we were fixed in one place, you begin to belong differently. We don't really belong to a place, we belong to a space. And that space is here in Ireland, is the River Shannon. We decided to live on a boat because the reality of a mortgage and commitment, long-term commitment and fixed abode was rather disturbing. It was crazy to pay someone else's mortgage, and at the same time paying a mortgage ourselves seemed equally crazy. We just happened to be walking out on the moors, and there was a day when the moors were boggy and wet and foggy, so we decided to walk by the canal.
We looked across and we were walking along, and we could see this narrowboat, and the smoke was rising out the chimney. It just looked really serene. And Giles said to me, "Oh, I could live on one of them." So we decided to have a look into this narrowboat business. We went all around the country looking at boats and looking at really dodgy boats and wondering how we can do this.
We went and started the process, which took maybe 3 months, and promptly bought a boat that we were standing only 100 yards from when we made that decision.
Once we got used to the idea of living in a smaller space, it went from there.
We initially started living on a narrowboat, which is pretty much the standard form for people in England. But living on a narrowboat in itself is quite difficult. So we decided we wanted a bigger boat. We committed to building Hawthorne. And then we set about spending 3 years creating the space that we now live in.
We decided to go across to Ireland by sea. Giles thought it was very important, with that connection that we have on the water, is actually to take the boat across by water rather than put it on the back of a trailer.
The vast majority of English boaters with desires to go travelling abroad head very quickly to France or Belgium or Holland. And one of the things that we were absolutely determined to do was to move the boat across the sea ourselves. We're excited by Ireland because of the space, but really I think the reality of it is we wanted adventure.
When we first arrived in Ireland, we were absolutely gobsmacked about how quiet the waterways were. There was hardly anyone actually living in Dublin. Can you imagine any city in the UK? It's absolutely heaved with boats because it's a cheaper way of living. The whole idea of being on the boat is kind of to get away from everyone, and this sort of idea of sort of being crowded. What really appealed to us about Ireland was the fact that there was a lot of room and there's space to breathe.
It was the desire for adventure, the desire for some new experience that drove the decision to head out west.
My personal circumstances is that my mum died and my father was quite ill. Once both parents have died, you realise how much you do things for your parents without realising it subconsciously. And I think with that letting go is that actually you're not trying to please someone, or you're not trying to fit in to what they think you should be. It's taken me about 30 years to accept that I am always been an outsider without really realising it, because I've never worried about going with the flow, fitting in too much. I did a degree in hotel and catering management. I gave up a flourishing career to become odd job on the narrowboat. What we found important was actually to go travelling and to be free is what we wanted to do. We do our very best to live life in the present and take life for what it is. I've always worked out that actually I'm going to be happiest if I be who I am and not worry too much what other people think.
On leaving university, I had a choice of going back to labouring on building sites or to go and work at one of the flagship programmes for the BBC. I could have gone and worked for the BBC as a researcher, but that's a professional class that I didn't want to join because, again, if you don't belong, and I mean, there comes a point when you try to belong and you actually realise that you don't. It's much easier not to belong than to try to. If you try to belong to something that you're not going to really work in, then that's a tension that's not always good. My buggering about when I was meant to be studying at school meant that I left at 15 and I did an apprenticeship in upholstery and left that trade simply because there was no money in it. Just by chance we bought a narrowboat that didn't have a cover. Given my skills and the fact I can use a sewing machine and know how to put cloth together, so I made myself, or made us, a new cover. A bloke 3 doors away, or 3 boats down the marina, said, "Could you make me one?" Within a year we had a full-blown business.
We make boat covers for a living, and that involves using a specialist canvas.
80% of what we do is on the boat, but the first 10% we make a frame, often, then make a template.
And then we put like a pattern over the framework. And then I transfer the pattern onto canvas. And I make all the marks and I put where all the zips and the windows and where all the matching up points in this space here.
I would sew it all together in the workshop in the back, and we had the windows and the zips. We have a workshop full of tools and fittings and bits and pieces.
Giles is a very skilled machinist. In fact, I'm not allowed to touch the machine, I leave him at it. And he sews up the panels, and then we're toing and froing, putting the panels together.
The good news is we can dismantle everything in here and return it home fairly promptly. And then, having sewn it all together, and once we're happy with it, with the last 10% is taking it outside and physically fitting it to the boat.
It's a complex job that's taken a good 10, 15 years to get really established. We've recently invested in kayaks. That's a lovely way to travel because you're so close and on the water. You're almost of the water and you absorb nature, and without even realising. We just wanted the idea of having an adventure. So we very much came with an open mind and open hearts and open eyes just to see what was going to happen.
When we came to Ireland, I wrote a blog. Lots of friends in England, family, who wanted to know what we were doing, and it was all very exciting. And so I wrote a blog, and principally with the intention of letting friends in England know what we were doing without having to send them all individual emails. We very rapidly found that wherever we were going, people were saying, "We like the blog," and we've been reading the blog, which was a bit odd. Writing a blog which you think is being read by 30 people to find out it's been read by 1,500 is a strange moment. And the inevitable consequence of that is everyone was saying to me, "Well, you should write a book." Why not? I had the time and the creative space and the creative energy to do it. And also it was a chance for Jill and I to apply our creative energy together, because one of the great strengths of the book is Jill's illustration.
Essentially, we work to live, and what we really want to do is be creative. Since coming to Ireland, we've had time and the space for me to pursue more my drawing and the art, the creative sort of side of things. I always enjoyed drawing, and I did a little bit of painting, sort of crafty, arty stuff when I was on the narrowboat. But since we came to Ireland, because we took the first year as a almost like a sabbatical, that's when we first really had time to have a sketchbook, and I tried to have the discipline to sketch pretty much every day. I went down pen and ink route and also into printing. So I started to teach myself using a lino cut technique, which is a style of printing. I indulged myself and got myself a little printing press, which is essentially like a very posh mangle with a bed that you put the printing plate and the paper on and put it through the mangle. Living on the water, it's almost like osmosis that you take from the water without even realising. Once you start sketching and drawing, you look at the world in a different way. You take the sounds, even the sound of the wind through the trees and the reeds. You realise you actually want to draw the emotion of being out there. If we're lucky enough to moor on an island, I'll go and find a little quiet spot and find a really twisted or dead tree and draw the roots and the way it gnarls, and I take it back, and I really enjoy, once I get to a certain stage with the detailed work, the actual tree trunk or even a branch with the ivy going through it takes on a personality, and you can almost see like a little goblin living in it.
I always think there's a desire to define yourself as different and to reject the conventional is actually you needing to make an identity. And I don't feel a need to make an identity. I just do what I do, and I live how I live, and Jill lives how she lives, and we live together very happily, and we do our own thing. But we're not driven by this desire to not be you.
We've always said that we're going to be in Ireland for as long as we want to be here. And it's one of the joys of having a home that moves, is that if we don't enjoy being here anymore, we can just move.
The word constraint is crucial. It's a restriction. And I think if you want to break those constraints, those norms, if you choose to do so in a way that doesn't hurt anyone else and makes you happier, then by God, go for it.